back with another video. This is a what the hell is this? This is a 47 Ronin from 2013 starring Keanu Reeves and lots of good Asian actors. So get this is who you've got. You've got Hiroyuki Sanada as the leader of Ronin. You've got Tadanobu Asano as the Kira, who's the villain. You've got Rinku Kikuchi as the witch villainess. You know, even though I butchered their names, these are all very good actors. These have all done great. They've done great stuff in the past. The director was Carl Rinch, who's a director of ads and things. So this was a debut, and the film's taken away from him and reshot and everything else. So it's hard to tell what he's to blame for and what he's not. But this is basically an epic failure of studio filmmaking, where they spent a fortune on a film that had a dark ending. They gave it to a first-time director. They cast a lot of Japanese actors no one knew who they were, and a one movie star who they had to try and force into the film as a half-breed character. Now that's actually legitimate. Keanu Reeves has got lots of different things in his genes. You know, he's not fully white, so and they use that every so often in some films like Johnny Mnemonic, so it's there. But they rely on that a lot because he's a movie star, so they have to try and force him in a lot this film. Sometimes in scenes he doesn't need to be in. So that is a problem in the film. But it's also the problem is they spent a fortune in a film that should have been like half the budget, because the film itself is a tragedy and you're trying to make an action movie out of tragedy. And that's never going to work. You can't do it. It's a tragedy. Everybody dies at the end. No matter how many action scenes you put in it, there's no way it's not going to be a downer. And no matter how much stuff you put in to try and make people care, these people are doomed and damaged, and there's only so much you can do. And the big problem was they actually made it. Now, I should say that I actually am fond of this film, but it's a mess. It's a complete mess. You know, I talked earlier on about Showgirls. I've talked quite a few failed films this week. Well, Showgirls was made by a director who knew what he was doing, even though he went wacko and did things that really annoyed the audience. This one was like a director, I'm not sure how much he knew what he was doing, because sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't in the film. But he was in the wrong film. You needed someone experienced. You needed someone to have to talk to the actors and get like the performances out of them, and could talk to the different people and get the shots to match. Because the first half of this movie, the shots don't match very well, and it's shocking some of the shots matching. But then you go to the second half of the movie, where it feels like it's much more what the movie was originally shot, was Men in a Mission type of thing, and most of that is shot perfectly fine. So I have a feeling like there's certain points in the film where the studio took over and reshot stuff, and that's why certain things don't match, because they don't have the filmmaker's view of how shots should cut together. Because there's stuff in this film, shots are cut together in ways like, what are you doing? Like, why? And I have a feeling that it's them trying to punch in characters into scenes that don't belong. But it's a real mess. And it's also a fantasy film, even though the myth itself isn't fantasy at all. It's a human tragedy, and they throw in fantasy monsters to it. It's just weird. But not unappealing, but very weird. So I'll start with this background to show you where the reshoots probably took place. The romance that's nowhere needed, like, ever. Like, you find out Keanu Reeves is a half-breed. They find him in the forest when he's young. He's got scars on his head. The lord of the area is very fond of the character. He has lots of skills as a hunter. And they take him in, and even though he's not in the main service, he's not like a samurai or anything, he is useful to them, and the lord does like him, and his daughter really likes him, and she's very fond of him. this, you know, that's because it's hammered into you so many times in the first third of the movie, in a way that it's definitely reshoots, because there's no way this would be in a script, because there's so many times they bring it up, like the father brings it up, and in no way in hell would a Japan as era would that be brought up and be acceptable in any possible way. The idea of this, like the only daughter of the Lord, fall in love with a half breed and it'd be acceptable. No way in hell would that ever happen. This is an American invention, and it feels like it was thrown in by the studio. Like it feels a feeling of something that was hinted at in the original cut, and people realised no one connected to those two characters together. So let's just chuck in more of it and hope it works, and it doesn't. Because it's just insulting, because it's like, well, no, that wouldn't happen. And the dialogue's terrible now, and it feels like you've just thrown in a lot of garbage to try and make it look better. And it's just dire. And it's the thing that sinks the film early on. I mean, the whole there's a whole section, the 13, no, wait, the 47 Ronin is basically the idea of the Lord of this area is set up by the villain Kira to be shamed, so he has to kill himself to regain his honor of his family. Then his samurai are disbanded forcibly, and they become Ronin, master of the samurai, and a year later they come back to get revenge for their master. That's the basic plot. Into this they throw in romance, they throw in monsters, ancient monsters, half-breeds, try for like an adventure story, all of which is completely against the main point of the story. The point of the story is it's a tragedy. It's a political tragedy. These people wanted the land, they manipulated the guy to have to kill himself to get his land. That's it. The Ronin, who are now, if they go against the rule of the shogun and kill this guy, they are doomed to die. And they do die at the end of this film. There's no way around it. It's a tragedy. It's like, how could they not see it's a tragedy? It's a famous tragedy. And then they try and make an adventure story out of it. It's insane. And the romance thing is just like an irritant throughout. Now, if it had been played as a quiet thing, like, it's not going to happen, just leave me alone type of thing, it would have been fine. But they try and push it so far. And then they try and push the idea that Keanu Reeves' character is so pure in the first section, and he's beaten up by racist members of the Lordship's house so much. They're begging you to love him. They're treating him like the puppy from John Wick, which was the next film Keanu did in Meeting My Bug Star again, and it doesn't work at all. The character works as soon as they go on revenge. The character gets to be like a badass trying to get revenge. The character instantly works, but they try and make him like this romantic figure. It doesn't work, and you can tell because the actors don't believe it. It's like, what the hell am I doing here? You can just tell they're forced into these scenes and it doesn't work, and they've all got the look in their eyes like, why are we here again? Like, this is the dumbest reshoot ever. That's the kind of thing that's going through the film, and it's jumping between that and scenes where he's playing this this guy who's like broken down and he's trying to survive in this place and try to prove his worth. And these two things fight against each other the whole time. But I'll go off that now because it's getting a bit boring. Now, they spent a lot of money in this film. You can tell, look behind me, of all the armaments and stuff. This big guy, this imposing big villain for the Kira character, who's his henchman, who dies in about 2 seconds. When he's been a threat for ages, then suddenly they kill him so easily, and that's the big problem with the film. People die quite easily after the big threat. But there's so much money spent on the design. And then they have backgrounds, because a lot of times it was shot in Europe and the UK rather than Japan, with very fake looking backgrounds, especially in the first half. The first half, they look really fake because you know they're reshoots. Or there's things that were not done properly, but they look like reshoots. Some of these wide shots and backgrounds that don't quite work. And you've all this money spent on it, and it looks beautiful, but they're forcing in scenes that go against everything they've just set up and involve that problem. So, but once the Lord gets set up and killed, that's when the thing actually takes off and is like, okay, we're going for revenge. Like, you've established stuff so much at this point, you know who the characters are, and it's like, okay, we're going to get revenge. And you get the feeling that like some characters should have been more important. Like Oshi, which is the Snyder character, he feels like he should have been pretty much a co-lead, and they always had to bring Keanu back in to make the American important, or the half-breed important. But the thing is, he's not as interesting as that character, that central character who's the leader, is a more interesting character, and he's in shortchanged throughout the film. And you've got a great actor playing him, who gets times he gets scenes where he gets to be interesting, but there's other times he doesn't. And he's always like second in command. And in the film where he's meant to be the leader, focusing this revenge. So it's sappy and it's boring, and it's just like, come on. That's your lead character is no longer your lead character. That's annoying. And so that's the problem. You also get Asano as the villain, and he's a really good actor, and he gets nothing to do. He gets to be smirky for a bit, but then it's like, okay, you've smirked around a bit. You just piss off for most of the film, and we'll give you some moody shots, but we're not going to give you anything to do that's any interest. You've got one scene where you get to be interesting, and that's it. That's all we've got. We're paying you enough to just to look moody and smirky and snarly, but we're not going to give you dialogue. You've got Rinku Kichu as the witch, who's his advisor. She's having a lot of fun. She's the best thing in the film by a long mile. She's just having fun playing this sort of witch who's controlling everybody, who poisons the Lord at the beginning to make him delusional, and she sets him up. She's a horrible person, but the most fun you've got. And basically, whenever her and Keanu are against each other, it's always a lot of fun because they're having fun against each other. You know, it's like it breaks the film out of its like weird adventure mode of two characters who just try to kill each other and distrust each other, and it's just much more fun. It's nothing to do with the plot. It's just more enjoyable. There's other stuff where they go into this magic forest to get these swords that has nothing to do with the story. It's a complete distraction, but it's enjoyable. And that's the thing with the second half of the film, is once they go on a mission and do all these things, they get into these little side adventures that are enjoyable, but they take away from the impact of what the film should be. And then in the end, you go towards a big action scene. It's like, it's not an action story. It's an story with action in it, but it's still a tragedy. That's the frustration of the film, is just like all these things that are fun. That if they weren't 47 Ronin's story, they would have been fun. This idea of a half-breed in Japan dealing with racism, and he's got magic powers. That could be an interesting film. It's not 47 Ronin though. I mean, it's just that all this stuff, and the idea of taking away Sanada's character, not making him the lead, when it's his story, because he's the guy who's leading these guys on a revenge trip, and he's not been given the proper respect as an actor or as a character. And it's becoming this adventure story with these great visuals in the second half, where the film directors are much more in charge. Like it feels like he's not been messed around by the studio, because it's like, oh, these scenes are fine, so he gets to leave them the way he had them. But it was a compromised film. But in the end sequence is a big action scene where you get them fighting against monsters, fighting against the human villains. They're doing all this stealth stuff that feels very much like an Assassin's Creed movie, before Assassin's Creed movie. But this actually does the stealth better than Assassin's Creed movie does. Because a lot of the action is enjoyable. It just doesn't feel like it should be in this film. And a tragedy. And I think if the film was better balanced, even if some of the action might have worked if they'd balanced up the lead character being Asano. Not Asano, being Sanada. his character, if he was the lead character, you could have done this stuff a bit more, maybe. But it would have been like, oh, I did the weight. But because it's been diffused, the lead character's been diffused so much, there's no weight. So you can enjoy individual moments, but there's no weight to them. And the end is basically suicide at the end. After they've killed the villain, killed the monsters, but they still have to commit suicide because of what they did. And it's a nicely done scene, actually, but it's still kind of sentimental when you feel the studio panicking. Like, we have to have a little bit of romance, like, oh, I'll find you in 3,000 lifetimes or something like that, which they say in it, and it's like, it's still a tragedy. And they're just terrified of it being a tragedy. They're throwing everything into it to avoid it being a tragedy when it's a tragedy. That's what it is. And it's a film scared of itself. It's scared of being what it is. And they're throwing everything they can to avoid it. They're throwing a lot of stuff that could have worked in another context. There's a nice scene that there's this prison thing where there's all these slaves in it, and there are a lot of the foreigners live, and they've got all these fights and they're betting on it, and it's a really terrific setting, but they're in and out in about 2 minutes. And that's where Keanu goes when he's by the way through the movie where he's a slave for a bit. It should have been a 20-minute section, and it's like 2 minutes, and it's like, well, he spent a fortune in this, and it basically disappeared. And there's stuff like that all the time. It's the things that you want them to stop at, and they don't, because they're in a rush to get to the ending. And then there's scenes where you think, God, I don't want to see any of this, and it's like, we're going to force you to watch it. See, there's the bits you think that this must have been going on longer in the original cut. They could have spent all this money for no reason. So the film is a complete mess, but I still find it enjoyable, even though I can't really defend it as being well done. It dramatically hobbles itself all the time, but just because I'm a sucker for this kind of movie, I still find enjoyment from it, even though I know it's a mess. It's one of those films. But I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope I can have interest you in seeing this mess. Don't pay much money for it, but it's worthwhile if it's on Netflix or something. But it is a mess. But it's an interesting mess to watch how a studio could misunderstand a basic story and just have no confidence in themselves. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll be back soon for another one next week. It's been a long week. It's only Monday. Alright, bye for now.